Welcome to The Point. I'm Marcia Kramer. Today we're getting right to the point with what could be doomsday for the MTA. Transit Chief Andy Byford is out. Now many wonder if the governor drove Train Daddy away. City Council Member Joe Borelli says Byford was so good we didn't deserve him. Also, the Staten Island South Shore Republican has a new proposal that is catching controversy, reviving the fight for Staten Island to secede, becoming its own independent city. Let's get the point of view from Councilman Joe Borelli. Joe, thank you very much for joining us today. And I want to start right away with the decision by Andy Byford to quit his job.
It's a shame. New Yorkers fell in love with this guy, which is odd for a bureaucrat, because he did something not many other bureaucrats do. He genuinely gave a hoot, and he was willing to listen to commuters, and he tried new things. We don't see that often, and it's a shame that his differences with Governor Cuomo weren't able to be worked out. But unfortunately for Andrew now, he owns the transit. So next time your train's breaking, next time the progress that we saw...
Blame the governor?
But he controls all the seats on the MTA, almost all the seats on the MTA board. He is the one who hired a brass band when he opened the 2nd Avenue subway. So if you're going to remove people that are doing a great job, you own the MTA from now on, Andy.
So do you believe that the MTA should be taken over by the city? I'm sorry, the Transit Authority should be taken over by the city.
Yeah, I mean, look at
municipal control.
Look at why the MTA was sort of consolidated in this giant beast in the 1960s from the city. It just hasn't panned out the way it should. We've actually ceded so much of our authority to control how we move around New York City. I think it's a good idea. I think it's a good proposal. I think having one person managing transportation is a better thing. It's actually the model they used in London. If you look at the London mayor and how he, at this point, controls transport for London.
So you hold the mayor's feet to the fire for the subways?
You hold real accountability to someone elected to be accountable. I think that's a fine thing.
Well, what's the difference between the governor being accountable and the mayor being accountable?
Because the governor can shapeshift on it. I mean, again, we see the governor literally hiring a brass band to cut the ribbon on a subway station when he wanted to claim credit. But the minute the subway started to break, he shirked his responsibility, handed it off to someone like Andy Byford, who does a great job, and then, of course, he resigns, and here we are.
So let's shift, so to speak, to Staten Island, where you want Staten Island to leave the city, start its own city. It's an idea that has certainly kicked around for several decades, yet you're doing it again. What's the chance of it happening?
Well, it's a great idea. Look, I mean, Staten Island has long been in favor of secession because Staten Island has long been a low priority on City Hall's radar. And when you're a city of 500,000 people, you're a city of the size of Atlanta, Georgia, and you are a low priority and you have not enough say effectively in everything from the roads around you to the schools around you to policy, people get frustrated and angry.
But how do you make it happen? In 1989, 65% of Staten Islanders agreed and wanted to leave the city, yet it didn't happen because of machinations in Albany. How are you going to get this done with, a democratically controlled legislature in Albany and a democratically controlled city council in New York City?
Look, it was blocked, in no vague terms by Sheldon Silver. I mean, Sheldon Silver blocked the legislation in the Assembly.
And Carl Hastie won't?
And Carl Hastie might. But the political will subsided on Staten Island to keep pushing when we had a mayor named Rudy Giuliani, who many people may not like. I happen to like him, and Staten Islanders like him because he was the first mayor to actually pay attention to us. So that's what sort of subsided the political will, which has reemerged over the last 20 or so years as we have, again, been put on the backbench of City Hall.
But are you trying to speak up for the moderates in New York City who may not agree with the progressive bent of the rest of the city?
Well, that's certainly part of it. 2 out of 3 of Staten Island's delegation to the city council oftentimes votes against the legislation we're passing, whether it's, putting solar panels on 1- and 2-family homes or the things we do about policing and education. I mean, these are things that Staten Island's elected representatives often do not agree with, and yet we must suffer through the policy results.
The war on cars, you don't support that?
Well, I mean, this is it, right? So transportation is our tremendously huge issue. And I can sit here and talk about how, the city stopped our subway 20 years ago, 80 years ago or so. But it's even worse than that because you have elected representatives who, in theory, represent Staten Island, actually going out of their way to make it less convenient for Staten Islanders to use the only method of transportation they have. Now, forgive me if I'm wrong, but if you're governing me and you're trying to make my life less convenient, I would have a problem with that.
But there's also an anti-cop sentiment in New York City. Is that something that doesn't fly in Staten Island as well?
No, I mean, we're proud to be home to so many police officers, police families. We, as our own city, by the way, would be the safest large city in the United States of America. We primarily support our police officers. We think they do great work. We vote against, our delegation votes against some of the restraints that have been put on police officers in the past. And we would love to be able to have the policy ability to control policing in the city of Staten Island.
But what if, you talk about policing, there's lots of other city services that Staten Island needs: sanitation, fire, hospitals. How do you do that? Do you contract with New York City to provide them? Do you do it yourself? How does that change the whole gestalt?
Well, the good news is we don't even have a hospital. We don't have a public hospital, so we're not going to lose any money in our public hospital like the other 4 boroughs. But just like every other municipality that's not the city of New York, we'll be able to have our own police department, fire department, sanitation department, and agencies like that.
So you hire your own police?
Yeah, see, every city in the country values their revenue based on the taxable assessed value of all the properties in that city. So I compared us to Atlanta before, another city of 500,000 people. Atlanta has about 55, or actually less, $44 billion in real estate value. The city of Miami, another 500,000 person city, has $55 million. We in Staten Island actually have $72 billion of assessed value in real estate, which puts us on an even better foundation than some of the other cities. You go to Atlanta, you go to Miami, you know, the fires get put up, the grass gets cut in the parks, and so on and so forth.
So you've also been a very big critic of the Thrive program, which is run by First Lady Chirlane McCray. Why?
Well, I mean, Thrive, whether you talk to the public advocate, the comptroller, the city council, or the mayor's management report itself, I mean, Thrive has been an abject failure. And not only has it been a failure, but it's been a money pit. It's not $1 million failure, it's $1 billion failure. And that's something that is significant in the city budget. Shouldn't
there be somebody in the city that says, whoa, wait a minute, this isn't something the mayor should be doing?
I think you have many people saying that. But this seems to be a pet project of the mayor and the first lady. It's not, and this is the sad part, most New Yorkers, bipartisan Republicans, wanted to see Chirlane McCray leading this agency to success. We all recognize we have a mental health problem. We all recognize there's a problem.
So why couldn't she succeed? Why has this program failed?
I don't know. I mean, it's tough to not put a bullseye on Thrive's leaders when you see other cities somehow tackling their mental health crisis. You see New York throwing money at the problem. It's not a lack of funding, frankly. Look, I've sat down with Thrive's leaders to try to go through line by line of what they're doing that works, what they're doing that's not, but there isn't too much good feedback.
So Chirlane McCray is now being put forth by her husband to run for Brooklyn Borough President. But there are lots of other people, in fact, even in the council, who want that job as well. Assess her chances. And, you know, there's a lot of people who want the job. Can she actually succeed?
I mean, sure, she certainly could win. And every council member looks in the mirror and sees a future borough president. So I think you'll see a lot of people entering the race. Unfortunately, my friend Ralph Espinal just bowed out. I was thinking of him. But, you know, she has a good chance. And I'm not going to oppose her because she's the wife of Bill de Blasio. I'm going to oppose her because one opportunity to direct government services through Thrive New York has been an unmitigated disaster of epic proportions. And that's, you know, reiterated by the comptroller, the public advocate, the council, and the mayor's own reports. So
basically what you're saying, if I understand you correctly, is that her leadership of the Thrive program makes her not a fit candidate to be Brooklyn Borough President?
Look, I'll let my friends in Brooklyn decide who's going to lead them. But if she was running in Staten Island, I would make every effort to remind people that she wasn't exactly a great leader of this agency.
So we have the New York City budget, which was just announced. It was short on new initiatives. What do you want to see added? I mean, what was left out that you think New York City needs?
I think big picture, and I talked about this briefly with transportation, big picture, we're preparing for congestion pricing, but at the same time, we have not seen any investment into new alternatives for those folks like me and my constituents who have to use cars. We haven't seen any new investments to get them out of their cars and onto public transit to avoid the congestion pricing charge. If anything could be done, big picture for that, that's what I'll push for.
So are you looking for some way for people not to pay congestion pricing? Are you thinking that some people should be exempt?
It's not a question of being exempt. It's a question of...
get a credit for taking the Verrazano.
Well, sure, but what I'm saying is congestion pricing is, in one part, a revenue-generating scheme. In another part, it's a way to disincentivize cars. If you have no option B other than your car, the disincentive doesn't work. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't mean anything. So until we are more creative about transporting people from the outer boroughs like Staten Island, like South Brooklyn, like Eastern Queens, until we're more creative about getting people from there into Manhattan, Manhattan, it's just going to be about the revenue and not going to be about reducing carbon emissions, and getting cars off the road and all the great stuff we talk about.
How do you get cars off the road in Staten Island? It's basically not a place where there's a lot of apartment buildings. There are a lot of people who live in houses, and they need their cars to get. It's a big place. There's a lot of geography. How do people get around if there's no buses? There's like that one little train that you have.
Well, it's a great train. It's a good train.
Sertoa, I know.
Yeah, it's a good train. But the result, or rather the goal, should be to create more parking rides. I mean, Staten Island has a last mile problem.
Where do you do that?
Well, we have one being built right now. We're trying to get it built in one of my town centers. We have built a couple around the South Shore.
Park and ride a bus? Park and ride Sertoa? What?
Yeah, I mean, instead of
build a new subway.
That's going to be an expensive. I would love for a subway to be built. Again, the city cut the subway from being built in the 1920s. If we want to go back and start building a subway, I'm all for that. But the reality is, doing a model like they do in New Jersey, where you leave your house, you drive a mile or two to a park and ride, you get on a bus, you get on a train, and you commute into the city. This works in every suburban county outside of the city. It works whatever direction you go in. You see this model. Only in Staten Island do we have this quasi-urban transit system, quasi-commuter transit system that doesn't seem to work as well.
So there's a big congressional race in Staten Island. Max Rose, the Democratic incumbent, versus Republican Assemblyman Nicole Malliotakis. Game it out for us. How do you think it's going to come? It's going
to be an interesting race to watch. I mean, I think if the vote was held last month after the impeachment vote, I think Malliotakis would have won the race. I mean, the president is very popular in Staten Island, but Max Rose has a year to make his case to some of his more moderate constituents that he's doing a good job, and I expect this is going to be one of the most heavily focused on races in the country, and there is going to be no shortage of money on either side being spent, and it's going to be a wild one to watch.
Take off your partisan hat. Tell me what you think is going to happen.
I don't know how to take off my partisan hat. No, I think the race will be won or lost based on the president's popularity, both in the Staten Island portion where he'll win and in the Brooklyn portion where he'll lose. And whoever turns out the most angry voters in either direction will win the congressional race. It's not going to be about Malliotakis and Rose. It's going to be about Trump and whoever the candidate is.
So you've been very active on social media. You're one of the more active people. You shoot your own videos. I'd like our viewers to take a look at some of the things you've done.
Thanks for coming to my crib, MTV. Now it's back to being a councilman. If you want to just chill out, you can hold on to your pipe right here for a little while. Don't worry, it doesn't flush. Don't worry, non-flushing urinal. Prison toilet. And then, of course, you got the sink with the permanent amount of spit and soap just in there. So this is good. All right, let's go check out the yard now.
So are you running for mayor of Staten Island? I mean, what's going on with your big social media presence?
Well, it's important, right? I mean, that was our MTV Cribs spoof, a parody on that. People just don't read local news as much as they should, and local stories don't get into the big tabloids. They don't get here on CBS as much as I would love them to. So the only way to reach your audience is to make them have a little bit of a laugh, make them have some fun, and in the process, tell them that, in that case, that was an old, dilapidated, abandoned bathroom that we're going to smash down and make a brand new bathroom. And this is a good news for the people of that neighborhood. So we got to have fun doing it.
And you have my vote for mayor of Staten Island.
Mayor of Staten Island. You heard it here first. You guys better support me.
Joe, thank you very much for being here.